Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the On the Pony Express podcast. I'm Billy Embody. Thanks for joining us on this Monday as you're listening to this. It is a jam-packed show with Jonathan McGill joining us to break down SMU's 35-24 loss to TCU on Saturday. We'll get to Jonathan in just a second, and also we'll talk a little recruiting as well. The bye week is here. Good time to kind of chat about it and reset it. We do that and more on this edition of the On the Pony Express podcast, presented by our friends at Northwest Insurance Agency.
When you clock in every day, there's always that chance that something can happen. You don't know when, where, or how, but accidents are inevitable. As a business owner, you don't want to be left holding the bag whether something happens to an employee or customer. General liability insurance covers everything from a slip or fall all the way down to a paper cut. At Northwest Insurance Agency, we will get you any necessary coverage that pertains to your field. So get covered under the sombrero by calling 855-88-75656 or visit us at nwagencies.com.
This is the On the Pony Express podcast, part of the On3 network. Check out all the SMU coverage you need at ontheponyexpress.com. Now, here's your host, Billy Embody.
1, 2, 3, let we go.
That's right. We got a lot to get to with Jonathan McGill in just a moment. But of course, we want to remind you guys that we are presented by our friends at Northwest Insurance Agency. Reach out to Mark Villasana and his team today for you to discuss your current rates, coverage, and more. See how he can help you save money on insurance rates. That's 214-352-5656. Tough one for the Mustangs this weekend, but we will have thoughts from Jonathan McGill here in just a second as he'll join the show. And before we bring in Jonathan McGill, we do want to remind you guys about our friends at StatusJet as well, statusjet.com. Reach out to David Henry and his team today to schedule your next flight. Look, SMU, tough situation being 2-2, but some great road trips like Clemson and Boston College and even Cal on Thanksgiving weekend on the schedule. Make sure you schedule your trip today with David Henry and StatusJet. Get your family, your friends, some work clients, whatever you want to do. David Henry and his team can help you plan the trip of a lifetime. And of course, you get a discount on a round trip flight when you mention On the Pony Express to our friends at StatusJet. So be sure to book your travel for basketball as well through them and see what they can do for you in that regard. So reach out to our friends at StatusJet today at statusjet.com. Now really pumped up to be joined by our friend Jonathan McGill, former SMU safety. And Jonathan, you were out there on the field coaching, helping volunteer for this football team like you have been all season long. It was a tough one on Saturday, 35-24. From your vantage point, what was that game like just as a whole, between the emotions, the play on the field, the last Iron Skillet? What was it like, that atmosphere on Saturday?
Yeah, I think it was a electric atmosphere to start it off. I think our fans did a great job of being engaged in SMU being able to hear our fans showing up for them. I think TCU did a great job as well with paying homage to the history of the game, pregame, a lot of things that were going on, and also going out there and really having fun. I think SMU played hard. I think that they gave effort. I think, there's always in games like that, 4, 5, 6 plays that you really want back. It sucks in the moment. But when you rewatch the tape, 24 hours later, you find the positive things that you can take from that game and move forward to propel you into conference play. It is going to be a new season. Obviously, when you start conference play, it's a new season, preseason. Doesn't matter. The tests do matter, but, the record necessarily doesn't matter. As long as you handle business in conference, you should have an opportunity to be down in Charlotte when that game matters. And so tough one for the Mustangs, but very excited to see some positives that they can take away from, Baylor, TCU. You've been tested, you have adversity. Okay, now how can we move forward with Syracuse, who just knocked off Clemson last week in a pretty dominant fashion, in my opinion.
And I do want to touch on something, and I probably should save this for last because you've been in two different situations with this team, right? You've been on a team that has kind of had some issues like SMU did last year and turns around and beats TCU and rallies and goes on that incredible run that you guys went on. But I think the 2023 team that ended up going to the American Athletic Conference Championship wins it. That team started off 2-2 as well, and losses at Oklahoma and won to TCU as well. And in both of those games, there were ifs and buts, some plays. I think that 2023 game against TCU was a little bit more sided towards the Frogs, of course, but that Oklahoma game, I mean, you guys weren't far off from that. What is it like in the locker room right now to have to circle those wagons? You're 2-2, but like you said, you've played 2 games where you've had a shot to win in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is realizing and telling each other the sky isn't falling, right? It's not time to, just worry about ourselves or worry about yourself and your stats and your plan that you wanted for the season. It's really just time to trust and buy into the program and really trust the coaches and their plan and trust one another as players. And so I think it's something that, it either builds you up or can break you down. And I think the culture at SMU is just gonna, keep people together, keep people strong, and keep the connection strong. And so the big thing with that 2023 season, we did have we went 2-2, pretty similar schedule. I mean, Missouri State, we played Prairie View, we played that 2023 season. We started off with Louisiana Tech, A&M Commerce or East Texas A&M, and then your 2 tests with Oklahoma and TCU. And so pretty similar situation. Lashley has definitely been in this situation before. Guys from that first team, Kilgore, Kevin, Cam Roberson, a whole bunch of older guys, right? Isaiah Smith, Isaiah Wokobia, Ahmad Moses. Those are all guys that were a part of that team, Jalen Davis Robinson, and they've been in these situations. And so those are the guys that the transfers, the freshmen, the young people, people from the 2024 season that weren't involved in the 2025 or 2023 season. This is a game and those are people that you really need to lean on during this time.
When you look at what Josh Hoover was able to do, what's your feeling after seeing that type of production from him? I know it's hard because the margin for error is so slim when you play a quarterback like that. You have opportunities to get guys on the ground. All 3 of McAllister's touchdowns were those situations where you had a chance to either make a play or get a guy on the ground. How would you assess the secondary's play, and just kind of what was it like facing that type of a challenge with Eric McAllister?
Yeah, I think first, obviously give kudos to them. I think they had a good game plan. I think that they had put their players in situations, and they won hard situations, right? The biggest thing I would say as a secondary that I had saw was that on 3rd down and 4th down execution wasn't as good as it needed to be. The previous week, you go 0 for 13, 100% on 3rd down. This week, I think it was 52%, and then they converted, I think, 75% on 4th down. So situational awareness and situational defense is where I could see this secondary growing and understanding, okay, this is opportunity to get off the field. It is going to be, a game of possessions. If we can stop, them from having an extended possession, stop them from 9-play, 10-play, 8-play drives, then that's going to help us out as long as giving our offense some confidence and convert, convert on 3rd down more than them. And I think SMU put ourselves in position to get off the field, and we just didn't do it. And so you learn from it, situational awareness, situational football. I know Coach Simons and, the rest of the D staff is going to be harping on that for the rest of the season and really during this bye week to really lock in on the details, right? The fundamentals, the tackling that we have seen. We don't see a lot of missed tackles from SMU defenses. We've seen a little bit on Saturday. And so I know that they're going to attack that harder. I know the players are going to take that, personal, and they're going to, try to put their best foot forward in this upcoming week, really on this bye week to really just focus and lock in on the details.
And I think the standard that you guys have built as a defense, and you, I mean, for you were part of building that, is so much about swarm. It's about tackling. It's about helping out your fellow DB, linebacker, defensive lineman who's there trying to make a play, but you can't in today's day and age make those type of plays without that help flying in there. Is that something that, when you look at this bye week, it's kind of a get back to that type of a, not that the staff hasn't emphasized it, we know that they are, but a drilling home of that type of a flying around mentality?
Yeah, I think so. I think you're probably going to see a team that is way more energized to play, a team that's more urgent, I would say, to play, because it is time. Like it's really time to make some noise. It's really time to really lock in and focus because you're this close, from being an extremely good football team. And then on the flip side, if you don't have that urgency, you could be disappointed with the season, right? And so you're so close to making plays. Been in games, you've led in the fourth quarter, and you just have to find a way to finish. And I think during this bye week is really when it's a reflection week, right? You look at where you messed up. You look at the games that you've played. You look at the plays you've given up as a player, the plays that you could have been better, and you also look at as a defense, like, okay, how can we develop and still play with another fast and for each other, right? Everybody has different personalities, right? So you're trying to figure out how can I get the most out of this player? How can I get the most out of my teammate without him thinking, I'm talking bad about him, but I'm just trying to make sure he's good and he's trying to make sure I'm good. And so I think this week is when you'll see that kind of more of the fundamentals, the swarm mentality that we have as a defense. Is when you can, harness that and lock in and really just build rapport with one another and your teammates.
The two slants to Eric McAllister, put talk about how that position is so tough to be in, as a corner. It looked like, and I don't know the call, and I'm not trying to get you to go into there, but it looked like it's definitely one-on-one. Maybe a little bit of help is supposed to be there somewhere, but what kind of position is that in? And with a big body like that, again, that swarm has got to be there, I feel like.
Yeah, the biggest thing I would say on both of those was really just wrapping up and tackling, I would say was the biggest thing. It kind of seemed like, in both situations, guys just, tried to shoulder and tackle. But, when you have a guy that's, bigger, right? If you don't come in with that force, then, that's really going to make sure he gets tackled. Like you really got to wrap and you really got to tackle and then hold on and wait for your teammates to come and be there. And so I think that was the biggest thing I had seen. More, just kind of a lack in fundamentals in a moment, right? In one moment. And that doesn't mean the player doesn't have fundamentals. That doesn't mean he's not locked into the details. But when you go through a game and there's 80, 85 plays, like you have to be very intentional with, am I going to give my maximum, most detailed effort in this play? Because this play might be a play that helps dictate the outcome of the game. And so I wouldn't panic. I mean, obviously just need to wrap up and tackle and do what you've been doing since you've been 8, 9, 10 years old. And so I think they'll do that next time. But in the meantime, it's, in that moment, big receiver, just got to get them on the ground. And it's explosive play, yes, but we just can't have it be as explosive, as it is.
And for this defense, I felt like the defensive line got some more pressure. They were getting to Hoover. He got hit quite a few times. I feel like, at least, kind of watching it up top. And when you play a veteran quarterback, he's going to stand in there most of the time, unless he's a veteran quarterback who's just got a super long leash, and is just out there because that's all they have. But Hoover is a guy who's going to stand in there. Sawyer Robertson is a guy who's going to stand in there and make throws. That experience facing those type of quarterbacks early, you don't want it to be a teaching moment in a losing, situation, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But how much does facing those two quarterbacks help this unit going into conference play? Like, put in perspective in your field level, you're not out there, suited up playing against them, but you got a good feel for the speed of the game with both of those guys, and one of them you've already played against. What's it like, maybe compared to what SMU's defense will see later on this year? Like, was that a huge experience for this group to face those two?
I believe so. I think, you looked at Baylor's receiving core. I think it was a really talented group. I think you look at TCU's receiving core. It was a talented group. They had two running backs, I would say, TCU, that were really good as well. And I know down the stretch, playing Stanford, playing Syracuse, playing Clemson, right? Cal with a quarterback, a freshman quarterback who's been, lighting up the scoreboard. You're going to play these teams down the line that do have talent. And when you've been tested in the preseason, it helps you at least have a reference point of, okay, this is how we faced the quarterback. This is, what they tended to do. He either stood in the pocket or he escaped more. Or this guy stepped up in the pocket. And as a defensive back, knowing what type of quarterback, okay, is he just going to stand in the pocket and pressure? Then a ball might take a little bit longer to come out because he's gutsy enough to, still get hit. Where if it's, a younger quarterback, somebody that hasn't been as experienced, they see that pressure, the first thing they want to do is scramble, right? And so knowing those situations, playing the game within the game is really something I think that's going to benefit this team. And playing Josh Hoover and playing Sawyer Robertson, two quarterbacks that, are talked about in NFL, scout meetings, two receiving cores that are talked about in scouting meetings by NFL personnel. That's just going to help this team get any better and get better because you've been tested, right? And I think that's the biggest thing to take away. If you're a fan, see the light at the silver tunnel. That's okay. We've been tested. We still have conference play lined up, and still have an opportunity to still chase a conference championship. In doing that, as long as we handle the business on our schedule.
What's a bye week like for you guys when maybe things aren't going perfectly or you didn't have the performance you wanted and things like that? Like, what is the week going to be like for the group for the most part?
Yeah, I think, obviously the main thing is, you got to get guys back healthy. And so obviously, practice is going to be practice, but it's not going to be as long. You might have, 2, 3 days, 4 days of practice compared to, a typical week schedule. But I would say the biggest thing, like it sucks because you train and practice and do all of that, but there's no reward on Saturday for the game, right? You have like the week off. And so you're just sitting at home watching games, watching your friends, watching other people make plays. And it's like, bro, like you still got this sour taste in your mouth from the previous week. And so I know for me, Baylor or BYU last year, it was the worst feeling because I'm like, bro, like I can't hit somebody. I can't tackle somebody. I can't get this taste out of my mouth. And you just had to wait for it to boil over to the next week. And so that's kind of how bye weeks go. Really, if you lose on Saturday, the best feeling is to try to, get that taste out of your mouth on Saturday. But the bye week, you don't have that opportunity. And so it kind of just boils over. And so, if you're smart enough, if you use it the right way, you got 2 weeks of rage to unleash on your next opponent. And so looking forward to seeing how we bounce back versus Syracuse.
Yeah. What are a couple things that you feel like that to kind of simplify things a little bit, not simplify the game plan, not simplify the scheme, but to break it down, a couple of things that the guys really need to hone in on this week?
I would say the biggest thing is situational defense and understanding flow and tempo of the game, playing the game within the game, right? So is this going to be a team that, we treat third down like second down because they tend to go for it on fourth down more? Is this a team where, they're going to be aggressive in the red zone? They have a great kicker, so, they don't have to be as aggressive. They can be more conservative. Playing the game within the game makes defenses that much better because if you can think and know what offensive coordinators are doing, not what the offensive players are trying to do, then that's going to be more beneficial for you as a player. And so I think that that's something that will be harped on during this week and understanding the game within the game as players. And then seeing how they can take that group swarm mentality to any and every situation and seeing how we can tackle better. We can, generate more turnovers. We can get more hands on the ball, more PBUs, and those tips can lead to interceptions. And making more of those type of plays that we've been accustomed to seeing from SMU the past 2 years. And really just building that camaraderie with one another, whether that's going out to eat, doing something outside the facility, playing video games, that type of stuff really helps build rapport with teammates and one another. And that, can lead to trust and can lead to guys being led better because you actually know who they are outside of, the helmet, outside of the facility.
Great stuff as always, my friend. We really appreciate you stopping by and spending a few minutes with us. Jonathan McGill, everybody, former SMU safety and volunteer coach for the Mustangs this year. Have a great bye week, my friend.
Appreciate you, Billy.
We really appreciate Jonathan McGill for stopping by, and of course, being so gracious with his time this season as he balances volunteering for SMU as well as doing some time in the media world with us. So we appreciate Jonathan for stopping by. And look, we have got a new friend of the program, a new sponsor for you guys to visit with. And the way the season has gone so far, some of you might be taking to tequila a little bit more than usual, but I can tell you, you now have a new tequila to try. And some of you might be familiar with it. It's on American Airlines, but Socorro Tequila is now partnering with On the Pony Express. They are the official tequila, I am told, of SMU as well. So make sure you support them. They've got a great story, started in 2020 and really have come to the forefront of making great tequila, becoming an award-winning brand here just recently in 2025 at the San Francisco World Spirits Competition, racking up a few golds and a silver as well. You can see there, if you're watching on our YouTube channel, the award-winning tequila, the Reposado in the middle, the Añejo and Blanco flanking it. I actually used it this weekend to make a tequila gimlet. Did a little Socorro, did a little lime juice and a little water, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, and it hit so well. That Blanco is what I used to make it. And look, the Blue Weber agave and zero additives make this such a tremendous tequila for you guys to try and support. They support SMU. They support us at On the Pony Express as well. So please check them out at your nearest liquor store, wherever you could find it. If you need help finding it, I can help you find it. But our friends at Socorro are going to be with us on the Boulevard this fall. If you find me, I will be able to give you a little taste of that. So make sure you find me on the Boulevard that weekend when SMU gets back at it against Syracuse. We'll be out there with our friends at Socorro, and we're really looking forward to bringing them in with our events as well. You guys know it on the Pony Express. We love to do events with you guys, our listeners, our subscribers. Socorro is now going to be a part of that. So really excited about this partnership that we've been able to put together. And actually, shout out to our friends, the Crows, for making this happen as well, connecting us with Socorro as they are jumping into the SMU world of sponsorship and now partnering with us as well. So welcome Socorro to the On the Pony Express family. We're really excited to have them, and we hope you guys try them out as soon as you can. And I can tell you, I picked it up right before that first Boulevard for some friends as well at Parket Market right there. So that's a good option if you're near campus. But Socorro is widely out there, so you can find it just about anywhere. We were out at brunch this weekend as well and was able to have a little Socorro margarita too. So appreciate our friends at Socorro. We're really excited to partner with them. Much more to come on so many things that we're going to do with Socorro. So welcome to our friends at Socorro. And of course, you'll be seeing them right here on the side of me all season long. So welcome Socorro. Try them out. They're Blanco, Reposado, and Añejo. And we'll be telling you much more about them in the coming weeks, months, and beyond. So thanks to Socorro. As we get into the back half of this podcast now, this is a good time, the bye week as always, to reset some recruiting. And of course, later this week, we'll have Hayden Howerton. We'll get into the film room and see a little bit of what SMU is going to have to solve. There's a lot that needs to be fixed on this team in a sense. But there's a lot to be fixed in the sense that, man, you're just so close, right? You're 5-10 plays away from being 4-0. And that's where it really hurts. I don't think this is a team that needs to be blown up. I don't think this is a roster that needs to be blown up. That is silly. And at the end of the day, this coaching staff is always going to try and get more players that can help them win and do it at a high level. And that's where high school recruiting comes into play. The 2027 class is starting to kind of see the wheels turn on some decisions come down the pipeline. And look, we'll talk about a couple top targets in a second that don't look like they're going to go SMU's way, at least right now. And one already committed and made his decision. But when you look at how this staff is really trying to build this roster for the future, it is through the high school ranks. And then you're really going to see them, maybe be able to develop these guys. And then we'll find out so much about this staff's development track. Because yes, they can bring in transfers who are guys that maybe have college film, or they were in a bad situation and then they get them into a better situation. We've seen that work out. We've learned a lot about that. And we know that the staff, for the most part, can do that at a high level, particularly when they get the guys that are really good athletes that can do that. There's some players over the course of the last couple of years that have been brought in to be depth guys. That's a difference. There's players on this roster that were not recruited to be starters. And that was a part of some of the roster turnover that they needed to do when they went from the AAC and Sonny Dykes' roster to the ACC. And at the same time, now you've been in the ACC, you've had success in the ACC. We've seen the uptick of recruiting in the high school ranks. Their recruiting class is once again tracking to be their best in the modern era. And in 2027, they need to elevate that even more. And the thing about this roster's future is that it is so far away from when the majority of these 2027 kids are going to start making their decisions. But the rest of this season, and continue to get top targets on campus and continuing to build those relationships and lay the groundwork, it's also important. And, who's going to be the Drew Evers of this class? Who's going to be that Alzur Miles of this class? Who's going to be the Evan Goodwin or Ja'Kai Anderson? Those are two different conversations, right? Drew was on campus a bunch of times. Alzur Miles on campus a bunch of times. Of course, SMU does, have guys like Xavier Barnett, Christian Rhodes, Cole Leinert, who committed early in the 2026 class. Those are guys that laid the groundwork for this class. But you've also got to go out, and when you're going to recruit in the 2027 class, you need to kind of strike gold here soon and find an early jump start to this class. And that's what SMU was able to do last year, and kind of get this thing rolling in that early going of the 2025 for this 2026 class. They were able to go into it having a couple guys already committed, and that really helped. You got Cole Leinert at the end of last season, and then you get Christian Rhodes in February after getting Xavier Barnett in January, and then you were able to go out and get some of these guys. You look at the four highest rated, or five highest rated guys. They're guys that, outside of Christian Rhodes, you either flipped, or a lot of people didn't think SMU was going to be able to pull off. Drew Evers, they hung in there. They kept getting him on campus. And quietly, Drew was really seeing the plan and seeing the vision and seeing why he could go there and make an impact. Evan Goodwin had programs like Missouri, Oklahoma State coming after him really, really hard. And he's a kid from Bauxite, Arkansas. And man, he is bought in at such a high level because of what SMU offers on and off the field. And on top of being a 6'7", 325-pound mauler, that's a good scenario. Alzur Miles, his whole family's all in. You beat out Oklahoma for him. These are some of the stories that you've got to almost remind yourself. And Ja'Kai Anderson, flipping him from LSU. You've got to remind yourself of what SMU has gone through to build this 2026 class, which ranks 22nd nationally. And I still think, you look at a guy like EJ Kelly. Can he continue to climb the ranks? He's now an 89 on Rivals.com. Does he end up being a 4-star? Dakota Dixon, can he continue to develop and move up a little bit more? There's Keith Doty. There are guys out there that have a chance to continue to move up a little bit and maybe solidify this class as a top 25 one. But the reality is 2026 is pretty much over, and it'll be interesting to see if they can find their way into getting a 2026 flip late in the cycle. They've kind of been able to do it the last couple cycles, landing a key target late. Who do they end up finding? That's the big question. And with this new era of rev share, and obviously NIL has been there for a while, but rev share, does SMU say, okay, this position isn't working out how we thought it would? We need to go out and we need to go address it in the high school ranks one more time. And we need to go and find somebody who we feel like fits our program, fits our university, fits our culture, all of those things, because it all matters. It's not black and white getting a 5-star. and saying, okay, all right, yay, recruiting rankings. There are 5 stars that you can kind of see, hey, there's kind of a screw loose there, or is he injury prone, or why didn't he play this year? All these different things. Those are those are situations where you've got to find your right path, right? But for SMU, the key here down the stretch in 26 is staying nimble and flexible and finding maybe one more player at a key position where you could say, you know what, we're going to go in and we're going to address, I'm not saying they're going to do this at linebacker, but Kenneth Goodwin committed at linebacker, Isaiah Young committed at linebacker. Is that a spot that they kind of look at what they have and they say, okay, maybe we need to go and grab one more? Or do they do that in the portal? Or do they look at corner and say, okay, Deuce Gilbert, good situation there. They've got Braylon Edwards and they've got Markel Ford at the safety spot. But I think at corner, man, yeah, do you go and say, okay, we're going to address in the high school ranks a corner? Remember, they were really trying to get Shavar Young, the Clemson commit. I mean, they were on the doorstep. I mean, behind the scenes, we had been told, not by SMU sources, we found out we're lucky enough to have a good relationship there. We found out this was supposed to go down. This was supposed to go down. This is supposed to go down. And Clemson ends up, making the situation work for them where he doesn't end up flipping. Good on Clemson. That's recruiting. There are a lot more recruiting battles than you think that don't get out there in terms of, maybe being closer to flipping or closer to going a certain school's way than you think. And then somebody ends up pushing it over the top and keeping the win that they had already kind of thought they were going to get. But at corner, in particular, based on what we've seen this year, if you look at this future of the cornerback room, and we're going to, for those of you who don't subscribe to On the Pony Express, I encourage you to. This week is a week where I fully plan to have breakdowns on transfer needs, kind of how they should address things, all of those things kind of broken out over the course of this week, because it's important for the future to kind of know, okay, this is what it's going to look like come 2 months from now, regardless of how the rest of the season plays out, because SMU does a lot of early planning for roster management during the bye weeks. They reassess their whole roster both bye weeks. Rhett Lashley's been on record talking about that. They take a look at it and they say, okay, where do we need to start planning for? Do we need to reallocate some things? All of those pieces to the puzzle, what do they need to do? I think you look at wide receiver and you're like, wow, the future is bright. You're going to lose Jordan Hudson. You're going to lose Romeo Brinson, Dylan Goffney, but you're going to return Ymir Knight. You're going to have Link Rhodes, Isaiah Robertson, Jalen Cooper, Carterius Brown, and then you got the freshmen coming in. You got to feel really good about that position overall for the future. Those, and if I didn't mention Dalen Singleton, I don't think, maybe I did. Good slot option that needs to develop, and he's going to have that chance. He's probably redshirting this year. But these are the future of this team is looking very bright there at receiver. I don't think they necessarily need to go out and get a veteran wide receiver. I think people have seen enough high-end talent out of Jalen Cooper, Carterius Brown, and not enough out of Isaiah Robertson yet, but the reviews were so good in fall camp that you should feel good about that long-term. Plus you have Algernon Miles, Ja'Kai Anderson, Xavier Barnett, and Ty Creathers coming in. You feel good about that group. I mean, maybe they add a transfer guy, but I don't think that's necessary. I really don't. When you look at a position like corner, I think we've seen it's necessary that when you lose Deuce Harmon next year and you have Jalen Davis Robinson coming back and you have Marcellus Barnes back, Speedy Nettles, that's a good trio in theory. Now, Jalen Davis Robinson has to play more consistent. It has to improve on a consistency level. There's no question about that. And Marcellus Barnes is a key example of, okay, he was hurt. He lost a lot of development time with his staff. He had a couple good PBUs against TCU or plays, in coverage last week. Maybe he comes on as the season goes on. Speedy Nettles needs more snaps. There's no doubt about that. But then you have JVN Holiday and Zay Gentry in the freshman ranks. They're very high on those. It seems like they're probably going to redshirt, seems like. But when you look at the future and you have Deuce Gilbert at that position coming in, don't you feel like you got to go get, like you tried to do with Shavar Young, you got to go get a corner in the high school ranks, like a good one. And then you got to go out and probably bring in a transfer, because what is happening right now to this cornerback room can't happen next year. Because once again, you're going to replace Jeffrey Emba, Shaq, Terry Webb, I think. Pretty sure it's his last year, but really haven't gotten an answer on the JUCO piece. You're going to have to replace those guys. Now, you're going to have Kevin Allen, Wu Spencer, and Jonathan Jefferson coming back. It's not a bad bunch. And then you're going to have Tyrone Winslow, who's redshirting, but he sure looks the part, like physically. And he's going to work hard and buy in. And then you got Keith Doty and Dakota Dixon coming in. But it's a hard position to play early. So you're going to have to go get 2 transfers, if we're being honest. Maybe. I mean, you got to go get one more starter, I feel like, right? If it's Jonathan Jefferson, Kevin Allen, and Wu Spencer, you got to go get one more starter. And then you got to go get one more contributor. And then you got Winslow, Keith Doty, and Dakota Dixon. That's a good long-term situation with a Kevin Allen, Wu Spencer, Tyrone Winslow, Keith Doty, Dakota Dixon. But maybe that's a position that you kick around the tires on a couple guys late. Kevin Allen was a late add for SMU. He was a late commitment. He had a monster senior year at Everman. They found him, and he was playing some important snaps against TCU last week. So this is the time of year where SMU sits down and goes, okay, what do we need to do here? And how do we address it? The portal is open at Virginia Tech, and it's open at UCLA. And who knows what's next with some of these other staffs. A lot of this planning is underway. So that's why SMU has to get an early jump on tweaking maybe how this all played out. And I'm willing to, not willing, it's not even giving a pass. In December last year, Jonathan Jefferson was healthy. If they knew that Jonathan Jefferson was going to get hurt, they would have done something different in the portal. They would have gone and gotten a starter then. And even though the defensive line market was tough, and they still got Jeffrey Emba and Terry Webb, and then they had to go out in the spring and get Shaq and Wu Spencer. That's difficult. That's not easy. And they had Eric Taylor. He didn't work out. They got him out of there before spring was even over. I think he lasted 2 days. I think his college career is over. I don't know if he jumped on a JUCO or ended up somewhere else, but it's not going well. They need to tweak probably some roster acquisition planning and kind of fine tune that back to where maybe it has been. Of course, the difference is this world that we live in has changed. It's a different world. And so they're going to have to attack that and figure out how to do that. But it'll be interesting. It is always ongoing. Don't get me wrong. That's why you have built out a massive recruiting department and scouting department, all those things. But really, this is when you get to sit down and talk as a staff and focus on it instead of having an opponent to focus on too. So they'll take some time and do that this week. Before we jump into some 2027 recruiting notes and thoughts, I do want to remind you guys about our friends at the Thomas Auto Group. Had a great experience last week at the Thomas Auto Group, getting my car worked on and getting oil change, tire rotation, all of that. They did a great job. Really, really appreciate them. They were super helpful. So make sure you schedule some service with them if you need it. If you're up in the McKinney, Plano, basically if you're coming down 75 from north of 121, it's a great spot to be. There's places around it if you don't want to sit in the service department, which I did. It was great. I picked up my coffee before. You could get coffee there even if you want, but I picked up my coffee, had a great experience. Awesome. I have no problem sitting there for multiple hours if I need to. So check them out, their service department, but also visit them at thomasautogroup.com and shop their new and pre-owned vehicles and mention on the Pony Express when you dial them up to get that process started, and you'll get employee pricing on new and pre-owned vehicles when you mention on the Pony Express. So appreciate our friends at the Thomas Auto Group. All right, wrapping up here, 2027, a cycle that is incredibly important for SMU to break through on a lot of these high-end kind of targets, in my opinion. And the training wheels should be off on a lot of this in terms of this is a staff that is well seasoned in recruiting. And they have done a terrific job recruiting at SMU. Top 25 class right now. They had a terrific class in 2025. They're building. They keep getting better. It's time to break through and get just one of these, like, and this is going to sound bad, right? Like, you're coming off of a summer where you have Drew Evers, who you beat out Ohio State for, and you beat out A&M, and you do all of this, and that is huge. And you do flip Ja'Kai Anderson from LSU, and you do beat out Oklahoma for Aljor Miles, and Mizzou, Oklahoma State for Evan Goodwin. I mean, those are among the 4 stars that you have in this class. But where are they? They're all on the offensive side of the ball. And I'm looking down. The highest ranked defensive commit is Kenneth Goodwin, 3-star linebacker, is a 4-star on ESPN. But the defensive side of the ball has to change a little bit. And when you look at the opportunity SMU has with a few of these guys, this is where they've got to take the next step. And when you look at where SMU is at right now, the number 1 and number 2 defensive linemen as far as rankings on SMU's, offer list are 5-star defensive lineman Jalen Brewster and 4-star defensive lineman Kadrian Redmond. And Kadrian Redmond was at SMU multiple times. He was there for camp. He was over at DeSoto. And then you got Jalen Brewster, the 5-star, who just announced he's going to announce his college decision on October 4th. And Texas Tech has a commitment from Adrian Redmond. And they have the Rivals recruiting prediction machine picks in for Jalen Brewster, number 1 defensive lineman in the country. To look at the offer list in 2027 at defensive tackle, the next highest rated guy I see SMU having a legitimate shot for is Kyron Hayward at Guyer. Now, I'm not incredibly high on Kyron Hayward as a prospect, and it's not because Rivals has him as an 85. I'm just not incredibly high on Kyron Hayward. I think he's just a good prospect. So SMU has to figure out where that next stud comes from. And I think they have some opportunities with some players. Like I mean, if you're looking at me and wondering, okay, what's next? Well, DeMarco Jenkins, 4-star defensive lineman out of Pearland. He's a top 200 prospect in the country for Rivals.com. He's got to be a huge, huge target for SMU, and they've got to go get him. He was on campus earlier this year. Amari Vickerson came up from Houston. SMU's had some success recruiting in Houston. And Jason Johnson, who is unranked, but man, I can tell you he is physically one of the better looking defensive linemen SMU's had on campus this year. You've got to figure out a way to get some of these players and get them in the boat at the defensive line position for a second straight class. Because what I hear a lot of, and I am with you on this for people on the board, you've got to get the 5 stars. You got to get the 5 stars. If you want my honest opinion, Jalen Brewster probably isn't going to finish the number 1 defensive lineman in the country. He's a really good player. He's highly ranked right now. But man, I saw him at Under Armour Houston. Something tells me that by the time his senior year rolls around, I just don't see it. I think he's a little physically limited from a frame perspective. And I think whenever you have some of these big-time Texas high school football prospects that get this early love, sometimes they just don't pan out. And I think he's going to be a good football player. That is my bet. I don't see him producing at the 5-star level. I don't see it. Give me Kadrian Redmond 10 times out of 10 over Jalen Brewster. I'll just be honest with you. And when you look at Cedar Hill as well, they haven't necessarily produced a bunch of incredible talent lately. Guys that have really gone out and played at a high level at the next level. It's been a minute. So they have to figure that out, too, is do you just recruit kids because they're from Dallas and they're this and that, or do you get the right players and pay up for the right players? Keith Doty picked up an offer from Texas right the day before he committed to SMU, or the day after, whatever it was. And he ended up staying locked in with SMU. Dakota Dixon picks up an offer from Randall Joyner at Ole Miss. He had the best defensive line in the country last year. That's a pretty good guy to confirm your thoughts on evals. He ends up sticking with SMU, not going on an official visit to see Ole Miss. Yeah, SMU has a lot of defensive line offers out in 2027. They've got a lot of options at that position. They've got to reel in a second straight class of two guys that look like, on paper, that can start and contribute and develop into a really, really good football player. And the same goes for corner. You've got to back up what you did with Zay Gentry and Javian Holiday, two highly recruited guys, two guys that you really wanted from the get-go. Those were Ricky Hunley's picks. When you go back through and you look at the corners that SMU recruited, there was Andre Clark, who ends up committing to Michigan. That was the kind of the other guy that you're probably like, ooh, man, that's who they, or sorry, not in 2020. That's in 2026. But in 2025, you look at that class and you go down the list, and there really wasn't many guys out there that, other than Zay Gentry and Jay Holly, that they really wanted. Kobe Foreman was the other one that early on committed to Oklahoma State, and they just couldn't end up kind of coming together on that. I know there's kind of some NIL involved and things like that. Other than that, they got the two guys they wanted. In 2027, you're looking at a class that really has a lot of upside in the future when you look at who they're recruiting. They're recruiting John Meredith, the 5-star defensive back who goes to high school with Papunga Katoa. They're recruiting Dylan McGee, who was on campus recently. They're recruiting Montre Jackson out of Lakeview Centennial, a 4-star prospect, top 200 player. They're in it with them. And they've got some other defensive back targets out there as well at the safety spot. Some guys might be listed as athletes, what have you. They've really got to find some players in the secondary to elevate that talent level for the future. Those are the two positions that I look at and I say they've got to nail in 2027. They've got to be able to supplement what they're doing in terms of roster construction and eventually take away that transfer portal plate that they're currently on. So with that, hope you guys enjoyed that. We'll try to do a recruiting pod later in the week as well to kind of get you through the rest of the week. But those were kind of some early kind of thoughts on roster building, looking ahead, and two key positions that SMU needs to recruit at a high level for the class of 2027. So appreciate you guys listening to this edition of the On the Pony Express podcast. Make sure you guys check out our new friends at Socorro Tequila. Check them out. Whether you drink the Añejo, Blanco, Reposado, check them out. They're award-winning tequila, and we appreciate their support of SMU and, of course, the On the Pony Express podcast, as well as our friends Northwest Insurance Agency, Status Jet, and Thomas Auto Group. For Jonathan McGill and Billy Embody, signing off. Hope you guys enjoy this edition. We'll catch you guys later this week as we get in the film room with Hayden Howerton.
Thanks for listening to the On the Pony Express podcast with Billy Embody. Follow us on your socials on X at SMU on3 and on Instagram at on3SMU. And keep it locked to ontheponyexpress.com for more coverage.